All right, so get this. We're diving into all things Elon Musk today, but we're doing things a little differently.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it's not the typical biography deep dive today.
Yeah.
You actually send over a bunch of English and Spanish sources. It's like someone hit shuffle on the story of Elon Musk.
Well, that is a unique challenge, I have to say. It is interesting, though. You get to see a bit of how other cultures view this guy, particularly Spanish-speaking ones, since we have sources from, well, Spanish speakers.
Exactly. So let's hit play on this shuffled playlist and see if we can piece together, what makes Elon, well, Elon. And one thing that stuck out to me from a Spanish source was that his mom was both a model and a dietitian.
Wow.
Talk about a unique combination. Not your average childhood, right?
It really makes you think about how those two paths, I mean, the fashion world and then this focus on health and nutrition, how those maybe come together in someone's worldview.
It does make you wonder, and, a lot of people might just assume Elon Musk, born with a silver spoon, destined for Silicon Valley. But that's not what our sources say at all. He was actually born in Pretoria, South Africa.
Interesting.
And get this, he taught himself to code when he was 9 years old. 9.
Wow.
By the time he was 12, he was selling his first computer game. I could barely turn on a computer at 12, let alone code one and sell it.
That's not just impressive. That's almost unheard of, even for someone who goes on to, become a leader in the tech world. It speaks to a completely different level of understanding and drive that early on.
Yeah, it's like he was wired differently from the very beginning.
Right.
But even with this incredible head start, he makes a decision that probably seemed crazy at the time. He drops out of Stanford. And not just any program. He was in a prestigious program there for applied physics and material science.
Yeah.
So was this a moment of pure genius or just utter madness?
It's interesting because you see this kind of pattern with Musk. You can even compare him to Steve Jobs. They both walked away from what seemed like sure things, Stanford for Musk College altogether for jobs. And why? Because this bigger, riskier opportunity came along. It's the entrepreneur's gamble, but like times 1,000. What does that tell you about their risk appetite? These weren't guys afraid to bet at all.
And in Musk's case, that gamble led him to Silicon Valley. One of the sources said he showed up with basically a computer, and like $2,000. That's a far cry from, spaceships and Twitter takeovers.
Talk about starting from the bottom. That's incredible. He gets to Silicon Valley with almost nothing but ambition and ideas and is ready to take on the world. And his first big move, Zip2.
Okay, so Zip2, for those of us who weren't around then or, don't spend all our time thinking about the history of the internet, what was Zip2?
Basically, this very simple idea that seems obvious now, but this is the mid-90s we're talking about. The internet was still this new thing for most people, and Musk has this vision of connecting traditional media with this new digital world.
So trying to convince newspaper executives that their future was online.
Can you imagine that pitch? Newspapers were everything back then.
It's crazy to think about. And it wasn't all smooth sailing, was it? This is the part of the story where we hear about him sleeping on couches, showering at the YMCA, just laser focused on getting this company off the ground.
Yeah, the sources really paint this picture of him almost obsessively dedicated.
Right.
But that's the thing about these Silicon Valley stories, Behind every billion-dollar valuation, every tech celebrity, there's usually this period of intense struggle and sacrifice that most people never hear about.
And for Musk, that struggle paid off big time. In 1999, he sells Zip2 to Compaq for $305 million.
Wow.
Yeah, he's 28 years old and suddenly looking at a fortune. You think maybe time to take a break, right? Relax. If you thought that you clearly don't know Elon Musk, this is a guy who's always thinking about the next big thing. He's just getting started. So he sells Decno. Zip2 walks away with millions before he even hits 30. What's the next move? Kick back on a beach somewhere? Nope, not Elon.
Not even close. He dives headfirst into this new venture called X.com, and this is where things get really interesting.
X.com. What was that all about?
Think about it. This is the late 90s. Everyone's caught up in the dot-com boom. But sending money online? That was practically unheard of. A huge risk.
Taking on banks, financial institutions, the whole system.
Exactly. But Musk, he's all about disrupting the norm. He wants to make sending money as simple as sending an email.
And that name, X.com, it's almost like he was saying, I don't just want to play the game, I want to invent a whole new one.
Right. It was a blank slate full of possibilities. And he had this knack for thinking outside the box. One of the sources I came across talked about how he basically turned every PayPal user into a recruiter. Word of mouth, but on a whole new level.
So even back then, he understood the power of going viral. Interesting. But X.com, or PayPal as it eventually became, Wasn't all smooth sailing, was it?
Let's just say there were some bumps in the road, internal disagreements, power struggles. And get this, Musk is actually ousted as CEO while he's on his honeymoon.
You're kidding. On his honeymoon.
Imagine trying to enjoy your honeymoon with that kind of drama unfolding.
Talk about stressful.
But it does say something that even on his honeymoon, he's juggling multiple ventures, always thinking ahead.
Oh, absolutely. Always on to the next thing.
Yeah.
But even without Musk at the helm, PayPal thrives. Eventually gets scooped up by eBay for a cool $1.5 billion. Which brings us to what's probably his most well-known company, Tesla. Now, a lot of people probably assume he started the whole thing, but that's not quite right, is it?
Not quite fun. Tesla was actually founded by Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning back in 2003. Their goal? To create a high-performance electric car. Something that could compete with those gas-guzzling monsters everyone was used to.
Which back then probably seemed like a pipe dream. Electric cars. They were slow, clunky. Not exactly the sleek machines we think of today.
Right. But remember what we talked about earlier? Musk's interest in sustainable energy, it all circles back. One of the Spanish articles I read even highlighted how he initially moved to Silicon Valley with the idea of working on energy storage for electric vehicles. So in a way, Tesla was him coming full circle.
And he must have seen something special in what they were building.
Yeah.
He didn't just throw a little money at it. He went all in. Became chairman in 2004.
And thank goodness he did, because those early years were, let's just say they weren't easy.
Understatement. Production delays, software issues, constantly teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. And as if that wasn't enough, the 2008 financial crisis hits.
Can you imagine trying to launch a luxury electric car company in the middle of a global financial meltdown?
Talk about terrible timing. But that seems to be part of the Elon Musk playbook. Doesn't he kind of thrive on proving everyone wrong?
There's definitely a pattern there.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, during all of this, he's also dealing with a very public divorce and, oh yeah, launching another company, SpaceX.
Right, SpaceX. Because why not? It's like he needs a certain level of chaos to function. But before we blast off to Mars with SpaceX, let's talk about Tesla's impact. Because despite all the odds, they managed to launch the Roadster in 2008.
The Roadster? That was a game changer. Expensive, yes. But it was sleek, it was fast, and it turned heads.
Suddenly, electric cars weren't just for like your eco-warrior aunt and uncle. They were cool.
And you know what they say? Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
So true. And that's exactly what happened. Tesla's success forced the entire auto industry to wake up. Suddenly, everyone from Toyota to Mercedes was scrambling to make their own electric vehicles.
Some of the sources we have even argue that without Musk, the electric car revolution would have taken another decade or more. He completely changed the trajectory.
He's a disruptor through and through. He shakes things up and forces entire industries to either adapt or get left behind. And just when you think he's done, he sets his sights on something even bigger. Speaking of which, SpaceX. Where do we even begin? SpaceX. Because cars weren't enough, right? He had to go and take on space travel, an industry that, frankly, felt about as exciting as watching grass grow before Elon came along.
It's true. Space exploration used to be all about governments shrouded in secrecy, tons of red tape. And then Musk comes in the Silicon Valley wildcard with this vision of making space accessible to everyone.
And not just accessible, but cheaper, too. He was obsessed with bringing down the cost of launches, which always seemed to be the biggest hurdle.
One Spanish article actually compared him to a modern-day Jules Verne, someone who dreams up these impossible feats. And just like with Verne back then, there were a lot of people who thought Musk was delusional.
Oh, I bet, especially after those early SpaceX launches, the ones that didn't exactly go to plan.
Yeah, there were definitely some explosive moments along the way. But even with every single setback, you could sense this unwavering belief that he was onto something huge. And maybe more importantly, he learned from every failure, always refining the technology, always iterating.
Which brings us to Mars. And not just visiting Mars, talking about colonizing Mars. Is he serious? Does he really think we can build a whole city on a planet where we can't even breathe?
He's put out these detailed plans, timelines, even cost projections. And it's not just about, escaping a doomed planet. He makes this almost philosophical argument about humanity becoming multiplanetary, a way to safeguard our future.
It's kind of terrifying and exciting all at the same time. Imagine telling your grandkids, yeah, Grandpa helped build the first Taco Bell on Mars.
It's a vision that captures the imagination, even if it seems totally out there. But you gotta hand it to him. He's brought back this sense of wonder about space, not just for scientists and engineers, but for everyday people.
He's like a one-man hype machine for science. But speaking of hype, we can't talk about Elon Musk without talking about Twitter, or X as it is now. His takeover of it was like throwing a bomb into the social media world.
Definitely a game changer. He came in with this image of being a free speech absolutist, wanted to create this digital town square where everyone could have their say.
But he's also made some pretty big changes, some more controversial than others. And that whole rebrand, talk about a shakeup.
It's kind of his signature, though, isn't it? Disruption, good or bad. It's in his DNA. And it forces us to really think about these platforms and the power they have, the responsibility that comes with that.
He's such a contradiction in a lot of ways. This brilliant innovator, but also a ruthless businessman, this meme-loving internet troll. He's been called everything from a genius to a madman, a savior to a villain.
And everything in between. But there's no denying his impact. He's fundamentally changed how we think about cars, about space, about information online.
He's challenged the rules, pushed the boundaries, and let's face it, broken a few things along the way.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Elon Musk, the question we're left with is he a force for good, a harbinger of chaos, or maybe a little bit of both?
That's the thing about Elon Musk, isn't it? He doesn't give us easy answers, just more questions, which is something to ponder as we go forward, because one thing's for sure, his story is far from over.